Hey, kia ora everybody. Good morning, good morning. Welcome to Dock Edge Schools. We believe in dinosaurs. We're going to have a couple of minutes while we wait for some of the teachers to enter our digital room. But yeah, we're very lucky to have, I believe Amy is the producer of the film, who will be coming to speak with us in the question and answer session afterwards. So we're very excited for that. I believe we're expecting Charles Bisley from Kelvin Normal and Vicky Goodyear from St. Therese School.
Hi,
Hey,
Normal
Charles.
here.
Morena. How are you, Charles?
Hi, Calvin Normal.
Okay, so we got all of our play issues sorted out, didn't we, Charles? So we can just push play when we're ready to go, eh? Nice. Okay, we will wait a couple of minutes just for Vicky Goodyear from St. Therese. Hey, Kelvin. Wish we could be there with you. Really enjoyed last year when we came and visited you at the Roxy. We had I was so impressed by all of the questions and the conversation that we had afterwards. So think up some questions as you're watching, and either Charles can type them into the chat box afterwards, or we can bring you all up on screen and you can ask us questions live, and we'll try and make that tech work. But yeah, please forgive us if there are a few little tech gremlins along the way. Yes, we're looking forward to next year too, Charles. Okay, well, since we're starting, I'd like to thank the Ray Foundation for making this possible. It's been a crazy year with COVID. I'm sure you've all experienced quite a bit of disruption in the classroom of going home, coming back to school, learning different ways, and we've experienced a little bit of disruption ourselves. But thanks to the DocEdge team, and particularly Alicia Adar here, um, the DocEdge Schools Coordinator, where we've made good progress to be able to bring these movies to you in this live digital format. So we're very happy to have you along. Um, yes, we believe in dinosaurs. We'll be having the producer come and do a question and answer session afterwards. So get your questions ready. But yeah, Alicia and I were just talking about how we found it fascinating that there are lots of different threads in the story. It's not just science versus religion. It also looks at economy and how towns and communities are built on economic well-being, and if you're underpinning um, a community or a society on an idea, then it's harder to debate that idea because everybody's jobs and livelihoods rely on an idea which might be controversial. So yeah, we're looking forward to having all of these conversations afterwards. Now, if you do have any technical trouble, Charles or Vicky, if you're in the room, you can email either myself or Alicia. She'll put our email addresses in the chat box shortly. Um, in the meantime, do you have any questions before we start, or any concerns, or anything about how we're playing out? Okay, cool. All right, well, let's get to it then. So, Alicia, if you can post the link to the movie, We Believe in Dinosaurs. And if you go there and then hover your cursor over the Play Now button, that pink Play Now button, we'll count in three, two, one, go. And then if you have any trouble playing it, you just get in touch with either one of us, and we'll make it work for you.
But
Okay,
we're
so
gonna but we're going to come back here after the film for the Q&A session. So don't close this box.
don't close this
We're
box.
going to turn our cameras and mic off, but come back and join us, please.
That's it. That's it. So we'll see you back here in about 1 hour, 15 minutes, and we'll have a question and answer session after that. So thanks for joining us, Kelvin. Thanks for joining us, Therese. And three, hover your cursor. Three, two, one, play now. Just push the play button when you're ready. Okay, we'll see you back after the movie. Here we go.
Oh.
Welcome back, just in time.
Okay. Here we are. Here we are again.
Excellent. So what a wonderful movie. Do some introductions here. We have Charles Bisley from Kelburn Normal, and we have Vicky Goodyear from St Therese School here as well. So we're very happy to be sharing our conversation about We Believe in Dinosaurs with young people today as well. So hi Kelburn, welcome back. Hi St Therese. I can see we've got a request to speak button already going. I think Kelvin are
Yep.
super keen to ask some questions just in case they have to dash off for some other classes. I'm not sure, but if we can, Charles, if you come up through the speaking room, it usually takes about 30 seconds or so, and you have to go through a
Yeah.
mic
So
test.
yeah, I'm going to approve your request. It's going to take you out so that you can test your camera and mic, and then you're going to come back in. So don't worry, and we'll see you in a little bit.
Cool. So we've smoothed out most of the technical issues, but we're still getting to grips with the post-COVID digital world. But we really appreciate you both, Amy and Monica, joining us all the way from America. You're both in America.
Yeah,
Yes, two
Wow,
different
it's
places.
Chicago and New York. So
Chicago and New York. That's fantastic.
two big
America
coronavirus hotspots.
to be one. Sorry.
Two big coronavirus hotspots.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you're safe in your home and that the people are doing their best to wear their masks and be mindful of each other there. I know that it's not always the case. Um, I mean, that's a really modern situation that we're in too, about the faith and belief of being protected versus actually taking steps to protect yourself. Do you see any correlation with some of the attitude presented in the film versus the current situation there with COVID?
I think we do. Uh, what's happening is a form of science denial, and it's happening very strongly in COVID times. We have, for some reason, politicized mask wearing in this country, and so that you can actually recognize which party a person belongs to by whether they wear a mask or not. Not totally, but it's becoming that way at certain gatherings, and so that's a major form of science denial. And the idea that coronavirus has just gone away and that we can just go out and live our lives, that's another kind of science denial, because the scientists certainly are saying that's far from true, and that we do need to follow the protocols of 6 feet apart and wearing our masks and staying at home when we can. But in certain parts of the country, that's becoming very difficult. And yes, that's a direct form of science denial. Rather than letting the data and the scientists lead us on, we are, for some reason, wrapping this up, this time in politics, as it gets wrapped up in religion and other ways of thinking than here's the facts, let's let the best science lead. It's a problem.
There were out of some religious quarters in the United States. In the United States, we have the First Amendment to the Constitution, which says that we have freedom of religion and freedom of speech. And those two things really came to the fore when a lot of people in religious quarters were saying that you can't have stay-at-home orders. We have to be able to go and meet in our places of worship. And oftentimes that message would be layered with this idea that God would protect them from the virus in order for them to practice their religion. And so that's also how religion got tied in with kind of a denial around the science and coronavirus.
And you hear it in interviews that have been done with people who were at President Trump's rally the other day. There were several that people like us who have just made this film can't ignore, where they said, if fatalistic things like, if God intended us to die from this coronavirus, then that's what's going to happen, and that God will protect us, and other statements that involved religion when they were asked why they weren't wearing a mask, which should be a different issue. There should be a way to separate those two things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Charles, and Calvin, if you missed it, we were talking about the correlation of science versus religion here in relation to COVID in America, where Monica and Amy are joining us from Chicago and from New York. And we're very lucky here in New Zealand because we followed science very strongly, very quickly, and we're not on high alert as much as the United States are. But there's a problem with the COVID virus spreading there because people uh, have less interest in following the word of science rather than the idea that perhaps God would protect them. Charles has a question here on behalf of Calvin. Are you both personally creationists or do you believe in evolution?
We are definitely evolutionists, which the creationists call us evolutionists. We belong, are part of a company called 137 Films, and we do films about the intersection of science and culture. And we are interested in science and the practice of science, and we are very much on the side of mainstream science. So we went into this with a great deal of curiosity, but we didn't go in as creationists in any way, shape, or form. So that's the simple answer is no, we are not creationists.
I am also not a creationist. I did grow up in the American South, which is where Kentucky is and where the film is set. So I grew up in North Carolina among a lot of fundamentalist Christians who did believe in creationism, and many members of my family still subscribe to that. And so that was part of my interest in joining this film and producing this for Monica and Clayton to direct. Because I really did see how that played out in my family and in the community around me, and how when you first are able to challenge that very bedrock fact of science, biological science, which is the theory of evolution, then other aspects of science also are up for grabs. And that really felt like that when people denied evolution from the outset, then it made it much easier for them to deny climate science. It made it much easier for them to deny the science behind immunization or vaccines. And so it really felt like it was a house of cards, with the base in a lot of ways being the theory of evolution. And so we were really interested in exploring that and how that plays out in the culture in the United States in a way that it really doesn't in other industrialized nations, or at least not to the extent that it does here.
Cool, and I can see that Charles has a follow-up question on behalf of Calvin. Do you think that the film would be different if the makers had different beliefs?
I think it'd be good if I can step in, because last week we talked about how in filmmaking how you were able to step in and make this film without approaching the people with different beliefs than you, like not kind of trying to villainize them or trying to do that. I think that'd be good to add into this question as well.
Yes, and we certainly went in, as I said, with a great deal of curiosity and wanting to know what is creationism and what do creationists believe and what do they believe about science. We didn't want to mock or make fun of anyone. We wanted it to be a very respectful endeavor. We like all of our subjects to recognize themselves, whether it was Dan, who is the archaeologist, and David, who's the former creationist, or Doug, who works at the Creation Museum, and everyone else. We wanted them to be able to say what it is they believe and not to be edited in a certain way that is in any way mocking. We know that it's important for people to really hear each other, and we certainly wanted that in there. So we didn't go in to debate anyone or to mock anyone. We went in with I like to think of our good questions, and we asked those questions, and then we listened and we let people talk. And whether we agreed with them or not, we let them talk and say what it is they believe. And that's that's really what the film is all about, is that, and we also took voices only from Kentucky. We weren't going to bring an outside experts from New York City or from Chicago. We listened to the people who were who were involved in this building of the ark, and the tax issues and the community issues, right there in Kentucky. So yes, absolutely. We didn't go in as non-creationists either. We went in with ourselves as filmmakers, as documentarians, asking questions to document what they believe.
Early on in the process of development, we watched a number of different films that tackled subjects that were sort of adjacent to this one. And we found that there were a lot of films where there might be a filmmaker who makes themselves kind of the main character of the film, and you sort of see everything through his or her eyes. And when you do, you often can sort of see their attitude towards the subject that they're dealing with. And oftentimes that attitude was mocking or making fun of. And when you go in with that attitude, then you're already alienating a whole group of people who might be watching the film and who might lend themselves to discussion. And you are also already saying that you already know the answer that you're posing about the film. And in the approach that Monica and Clayton take in letting people speak for themselves, but still having a point of view and being pro-science, we believe that it allows for more room for discussion, and that more questions can arise about things, so that it just lets more people into the room rather than alienating people. So that was the intention.
And the other thing is, we don't use a narrator. We don't have this, what's often referred to as the voice of God, kind of ironically here, but we don't have someone telling the audience what to think, that our characters speak for themselves. And so, and that's another way to editorialize with a narrator, and we were trying not to do that.
Right. Alicia, I can see more questions coming up here. Maybe you'd like to throw some of those out.
Yeah, so have you encountered creationist ideas in non-Christian religions?
Can you repeat the question?
Have you encountered creationist ideas in non-Christian religions?
Oh.
I think I can say that when we were doing the research on those who accepted the theory of evolution, there were Muslim countries that came up, but I'm not well versed enough to discuss what their views are on that. So it is possible that outside of Christianity, you don't hear about it in our country. It is fundamentalist, which means a back to the Bible kind of approach to religion. So it's based on the Bible and a literal translation of the Bible, which is, of course, the Christian holy book. So I can't really speak about this, but I do think there are other countries that are non-Christian that have some view on the theory of evolution.
And I mean, I'd like to just put a thought in here is that really one of the most interesting strands that I found within the movie is how closely that religion is tied to politics, and the idea of the separation of church and state, and how public money from the whole population, some of whom are probably only Christian, whereas within a whole population you've got all sorts of different religions, as well as people who don't necessarily even subscribe to the idea of religion. Basically, they have to contribute money to this project, which seems a little unfair. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit more about the idea of the separation of church and state in the United States, because we don't really have much of that concept here in New Zealand?
It is a founding principle of the United States. The people who came here often came from Catholic or Christian countries where they were persecuted for their beliefs. And so it is not, as it's pointed out to us, in many ways, it's not in the Constitution. It is a principle of understanding about the way our world works. And it is in tax laws and all kinds of things that there is supposed to be a separation of church and state, and that tax money is not supposed to go to religious organizations. And of course, the United States is a very diverse country, and we have everything. We have Hindu, and we have Muslim, and we have Buddhist, and we have many branches of the Protestant faith, and we have Catholics, and we have Jewish faiths, and we all are living together in the same country. So there is a danger to be asking for in certain, and it certainly happened in Kentucky, for religious privilege as opposed to religious freedom. Yes, we have religious freedom in this country, but religious privilege would be putting something in the public schools, for instance, that is fundamental to one faith, but not to others. And we've had a problem in this country all along with Christian carols being sung at Christmas time, where there's Jewish people and yes, I will say there are atheists, and there are Hindus, and there are Muslims, and so the very nature of our country calls out for this separation of church and state, and it's been eroded at various times in our history, and it's becoming very eroded right now. So this is a problem, and one of the issues in the film is that taxpayers' money were to be given to the building of the ark and to the running of the ark. There was this tax situation going on, and there were people, of course, who were protesting that and saying that I don't want my money to go to a religious organization. Ken Ham's argument was that it was a tourist attraction, and tourist attractions should get the same as any kind of amusement park or any kind of tourist attraction. He should get the same thing at the Ark, and that's a problem in our country. And there was a lot of pushback about it, and it came and it went, and now they have it. And so that is a major point of the separation of church and state, as is teaching creationism in the biology classes that has been fought in our country too. So it's a problem, and there are organizations that are fighting against it, as you can see in the film. But I don't know how it works in other countries, but in our country, we're supposed to have the separation of church and state. Like, none of the 10 Commandments in courthouses. They have talks about praying before meetings that are public meetings for everyone. They've dealt with that somewhat by having a rabbi and a priest and a minister rotating and doing prayers. But there are other people who say, no, that's not fair either. So it's an ongoing discussion in this country, and there are concerns about it being severely eroded in the present time that we're living through.
You have anything to add to that, Amy? That was a very comprehensive answer.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would just say that education is one of the main ways in which we fight these battles all the time. Monica mentioned that creationism is often introduced to our state legislatures so that can be included in the curriculum of public schools that are funded by taxpayers. Our current Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, is fighting very hard for money to be given to vouchers that families can use to pay for whatever education they want. And if that education includes going to a very fundamental school to learn only creationism and not learn any other form of science, then that's how taxpayer money can be used if those voucher systems are put in place. So it is an issue of one religion being privileged over another, and this freedom of religion idea that we have in the First Amendment. A lot of fundamentalist Christians on the right are always saying you can't tell us how to practice our religion because we have freedom of religion, and one way that we're going to practice our religion is to make sure that we have these schools, and we need to be able to pay for our schools in the same way that kids who go to public school can pay for their public school. So they use arguments from the Constitution sort of even against this principle. So it's just it's a constant battle of legalese a lot of the time.
It's playing out in COVID times too, because there is this argument of certain governors closing churches in their states because of the threat of the virus. And there were fundamentalist Christian churches and probably others that were saying we have the right to meet, and that's against religion. And then there was discussion, no, if we close every church, there is no selecting out one group over another, then that is a legal issue in a health emergency. But there was a lot of pushback on that too.
So we've got another question from Kelvin here. How was the documentary received by creationists? Have you had people picketing outside with placards and?
No, not at all. We have had some really interesting Q&As afterwards, and there was a woman who came to one of them and gave us a lecture about freedom of religion. That was her main thing, was that they have a right to proselytize and they have a right to take it into the schools, and they have a right to their science over other sciences, and and the audience it was in Massachusetts at Woods Hole, and the audience got very tense. I could feel the tenseness in the audience, and I after the woman gave us this long lecture, I said, so are you saying that you think we were unfair and that the movie is bad? After a long lecture. And she said, no, I like the movie. And everyone, they laughed, and the audience, the tension went right out of the audience, because I think we were very fair. So I think there's, Ken Ham has done some pushback and
There've
said,
been a lot of angry op-eds. That's been the primary counter to the film, is that there have been a lot of angry op-eds from various quarters, and there have been calls from people
Can you just describe for the students what an op-ed is?
Oh, an op-ed, an opinion editorial piece. So it's a piece that's written by one person's point of view in the newspaper to express a particular opinion. And so they have the op-ed page in a lot of newspapers in the United States. And so people of note or people involved with an issue will write one of these, and it will be published in the newspaper. And then there'll be letters to the editor of the newspaper that sort of counter that. So there are these arguments that are going on in the press in the United States. And so Ken Ham published a number of op-ed pieces in newspapers to say, to sort of go point by point and counter things that he disagreed with in the film. As it turned out, there weren't a lot of things he could say were wrong, or really no things he could say were wrong, just things that he didn't like. And then we also had a few other people who had sort of a call to arms among true believers to come and rate our film low on various platforms, so that if you go to a lot of platforms, you'll see that we have mostly like very high ratings, and then suddenly not really a lot in between, and then a lot of ones. That largely came about because of the sort of call to disincentivize people from watching the film by seeing that it had poor ratings. So
he also told them not to watch the film, just to rate it low.
Yeah,
he didn't want them to watch the film. So we've also had, there was one guy who walked up to Clayton after the film and said, I came here angry and that I wasn't going to like the film. And I got to say, it's pretty good. So we've had a lot of those kinds of responses, because they watch it, and if you want to listen to Doug and you want to listen to the voices that you agree with, it's there. We have this thing called the woman organized this Southern tour here, and I was off on the Southern tour, and there were a couple faith-based colleges that I went to that the young people especially really wanted a dialogue of what I believed, and did I have my faith changed by going through this, and I wanted them to understand that if I asked them to change their faith, would that be easy to do? And so we had some very honest questions back and forth. And I said, remember, Doug says in there, I'm not going to convert you when you walk out the door. He knew that he wasn't. And we knew we didn't go in there to convert anyone to evolution. So it was a give and take. But many of the young people wanted to do that kind of discussion. They also wanted to discuss how they couldn't talk to their parents about their evolving ideas and beliefs, and that they felt very in line with David, and that they felt that they were David, and that they'd gone to college and thought things through, and they wanted to change their views on certain things, and they knew their families would not accept that, or they would hurt their family, which is something David worried about a great deal. So there was that kind of feedback too. So we got all kinds of feedback from creationists all over the map, but except for Ham, most of it has been positive or nuanced and not just a pushback.
And I think that's the most important thing that any filmmaker can really aspire to, is to have a starting point for a conversation about a controversial topic. Like, the word controversial is like versus to talk, and contra is back and forth. You know, we've got to have conversations where there are nuances, and where there are different points of view from all perspectives, not just one way or the other. I mean, there were several threads in there about how the economy might have been boosted by this. And you know, if you were a struggling artist, it looked like they were doing some amazing work. If you were in construction, there was a huge, possibly from a certain point of view, it was a huge positive thing. But we do need to keep talking about these very important issues, and how we perceive the world around us, and how we try to really ground our economy and our society in facts, and faith is good. Before you go, I'd like to hear about what you would say to young people who have been perhaps brought up with the golden rule, love thy neighbor, do unto others as they would have done to you. You know, there are some good, strong values within the Christian faith. What would you say to them who are suddenly presented with this controversial idea that perhaps that Christianity has some limitations?
What I say to young people is we're not attacking faith. And when in the film, we were very careful to have the Baptist minister in there who said that he absolutely accepts that God created the heavens and the earth, and that he has a purpose for it, and and that he sees no problem with accepting the theory of evolution and accepting his faith. And that I tell them that I was raised a Christian, and my church never, I was Catholic and raised a Catholic, and I was never asked to make a choice between my faith and the theory of evolution, or in science and science facts. I appreciate the struggles that some of them are having, because they are asked those things. I was not, and it wasn't an either or proposition. And so I understand that this struggle is difficult, and we made a film about science and the pressures on science, and that's where we feel we made our film. They need to have discussions with their families and their friends and with themselves about what they need to do with Genesis, for instance. That isn't our thing to step into. That's for them to do the work on that. Do they need to accept a literal Bible, or can they see it like David, as metaphorical and beautiful, and still accept science and the facts that come out about the world that makes it better for us? I mean, and that they can use the scientific method to find the next series of antibiotics and vaccines, which we desperately need, and that you need to use the theory of evolution for. So I think that they need to do that inquiry, but they should know that they don't need to give up their faith and accept science. Two of the members on our board are Catholics. They're very supportive of this film, and they're practicing Catholics, and they do not feel that they need to make that kind of choice. They have both in their life. And so we're not out to take faith away from anyone. That would be, that would be a step beyond what we're even capable of doing, and we don't want to go there. That it wasn't the goal of this film at all. So, yes.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And we are just about to wrap up. Amy, what are your last thoughts to communicate to the students who might have conflicting thoughts about the movie?
I think one of the most important things that we can do as we look at this world is to be able to hold two competing thoughts in our head at the same time, and not have to say that it's either or. Sort of like what Monica was saying, that if you can, I keep thinking of this thing that I read when I was studying folklore and when I was studying, it was talking about religious stories. And there was included in this book was a story from the Lakota, an indigenous tribe to the United States. And they preface all of their stories with, all of their origin stories with, I don't know if it happened this way, but I know that it's true. And so I think to be able to look at religion as something that's about truths around morality and around how we see the world, rather than it having to be a book of biology, or as Monica was saying, a book of history, or as David says, he never learned that it could be a book of poetry or a book of metaphor. But that if you can take those things about religion that fortify us and that help us to understand our common humanity, then I don't think that needs to go away when you also look at science, which helps us look at our common humanity in a different way.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I think that's us for today. Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you to Kelvin and Charles, and also to St. Therese and Vicky, and to Alicia, who's been studiously looking at the questions in the background here. Also, thank you to Ray Foundation and everyone at Doc Edge for making this screening and Q&A possible. We really value all of you, and especially you, Amy and Monica, for taking the time to come and speak with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the great questions. Thank you for doing this. It's been great.
All good. Okay, well, you guys have a great night, and we'll see you for the final session next week.
All right.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye.
Have a good night.